Hi, this is Tim Santoni, and welcome to Santoni Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by Eli Rosenblatt, coming to us from Oregon. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Eli, where he's been, what he's up to, and kind of his new project and company that he's launched. Before we get into the show, Eli, maybe give the viewers a sense, a little bit of your history, your background, and what you're up to these days.
Sure thing. I started working as an investigator in the early 90s in San Francisco. I got an internship at a law firm and just fell in love with it. Uh, Unlike many of my colleagues, I didn't come to it from being former law enforcement or anything like that. Uh, it's just something that I had not thought about and got really excited about. I got very intensive training in all kinds of investigation in those years, first doing strictly criminal defense and then moving on to other types, family law, tenants' rights, that sort of thing. And I then took a handful of years off to do other things. It was the dot-com boom. I did a lot of computer consulting. I did a lot of network installation, home theater systems, all kinds of different things. And then when I moved to Oregon in the early 2000s, I hadn't really thought of starting up as an investigator again until a friend who's an attorney approached me and said, you should really get your license here in Oregon. I could really use someone. And I thought, oh, I could be an investigator again. So that was 2007, and I haven't really taken much of a day off since then. My practice is mostly focused on workplace cases, family law, some criminal defense still. I did a lot of that in the beginning, but these days I take it on very little, only really large long-term matters, and pretty much only retained cases at this point. And I do a handful of other kinds of things like civil and sometimes insurance types of things.
Gotcha. So, investigator at the core, kind of tried some different things and kind of back at it now. So, in terms of what are the maybe top three things or top three types of cases you enjoyed handling the most, and maybe why?
Sure. Well, it has just been me. It's a solo practice. I bring on other investigators as needed from time to time. And I would say that the majority of the cases I have these days are still workplace cases where I'll be hired by in-house counsel or an HR department working with their counsel to come in and do a series of interviews, look at tons of documents, all kinds of digital and paper artifacts to figure out what happened, who knew what, when, and whether or not there's something that they need to take further action on. I've done things like embezzlement, conflict of interest, workplace theft, harassment, all kinds of workplace issues that I've handled. In addition to that, I would say a good percentage of my cases these days are family law. So tracking down heirs, figuring out assets in a large divorce, doing in-depth background searches, or sometimes even surveillance on exes and new spouses or boyfriends or girlfriends of the ex. Lots having to do with parenting and what's going on that the client can't see, client doesn't have a handle on.
Gotcha.
I don't do physical surveillance myself anymore, really. I spent quite a bit of time doing that earlier in my career. These days, there's just so many folks, there's so many men and women who make that their livelihood entirely, and they have all the best gear. They keep up to date on all of it. They dedicate their vehicles to it. That's not my not my thing, and I just know that if I were to do that, first of all, it's not easy to do. Sometimes there's a myth, I think, in the industry where people think, oh, I could just sit in a car all day. It's not easy. You have to be dedicated and focused and on top of your game. And
Yeah, I can relate. I think people think that there's this really fun, enjoyable thing about being a surveillance operative, and like I say, those people that do it and do it well, they have their own way they operate, what happens, and it's not as exciting and as glamorous as people make it out to be. But those ones that do it well really set themselves apart. And I'm with you. I don't do that any longer myself. And
Yeah. 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 And
so,
last year and the year before, we had a spate of cases like this where family law attorneys that we work with pretty closely brought us in for a series of surveillance cases where we were trying to find out what was going on with the kids while they were with the other parent, and we had some real successes there. I actually wrote a piece on it on LinkedIn. Folks can check that out. But I would say the rest of my practice is just kind of a grab bag of locates and in-depth backgrounds, a lot of due diligence for business folks wanting to see whether or not they should invest in something or go into partnership with someone, all that kind of stuff.
gotcha. So as a fellow private investigator and someone that works with law firms, attorneys, insurance companies, private clients, I always like to ask this question, which is, what is, in your opinion, the biggest misinformation or myth about the investigation practice as it relates to, databases, research, public records, in your view, what's that biggest myth that people call and they assume that because they're calling, an investigator that you can do or have access to?
That's a great question, Tim. I would say that the biggest myth on the part of the general public, but also on the part of folks who are thinking about becoming investigators, or just starting out in the field, is what I would kind of call the one-click myth, that most everything they need to find can be found just with very brief searches online. It's just not at all the case. First of all, and this took me a while to really understand, search engines only index, I think the last studies I read were somewhere between 8 and 12% of what's available online. The rest is tied up in these databases and online libraries and repositories of all kinds that just don't get indexed by search engines at all. So that includes news media, that includes library information, that includes newsletters from journals and from different associations. But of course, it also includes lots and lots of public records. Still to this day, I have clients, attorneys, who just kind of have it in their mind somehow that whatever public record they want should be able to just be downloaded quickly and easily, no matter where it's from. Fortunately, that's just newer attorneys usually. Older attorneys are generally, they understand how long these things can take, but it's surprising to me still that so few county courthouses are online. Lots of them are, and more of them are completely digitizing all their records and making it so that any new cases are digital from the beginning. But there's still a very large percentage of cases that I work on where some records need to be gathered by hand in person. So I'll have to contact a runner in a county in another state and say, I need these records. First, I need to see whether or not they're there, and then I need to see what is there, what kinds of records, and how many pages it is, and then I'll need copies. So it's a long process. It's not a simple, quick and easy, just click here and you're done. Sometimes we get lucky, and certainly here in Oregon, we are very blessed to have a county court system where every single county is on the same system and searchable statewide instantly. Whereas a state like California, for you all, it's each and every county is totally different, and a lot of them are not networked with most of them are not networked with each other, and a lot of them are not online at all. So yeah, it varies from state to state, and I think that's one of the biggest myths is people just assume, oh, well, records these days, I should just be able to download it after a quick Google search. But it's unfortunately the case.
I would agree with you 100%. We work with so many clients that they suffer from what I call, they trust the Westlaw, IRB, Accurate, Lexis search, and they don't understand that there's limitations with regard to electronic scraping with those commercial databases. And they're like, well, why would I hire an investigator when I've got this? Well, that's a database tool. It's not an investigator. And so they don't realize that just because it says DMV as part of it, it doesn't mean that it's it's able to pull records in DMV in every state. As you know, DMV records are very more difficult to get a hold of. And if the courts aren't available, then Lexis can't pull them. It doesn't mean they're scraping them every day or every month. Maybe they pulled them once. It's just unbelievable. So as we move on, and I want to talk a little bit about your new project, your new company, TraceX. Maybe give our viewers a sense of how that came to be, a little bit about it, some context very interesting and very important in today's world. And I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's something I'm super excited about. Over the last few years, I've had more clients, not tons, but a handful here and there, ask me during the course of whatever case I'm working on with them, if I can help them remove their personal information from everywhere they find it online. And gradually, I found that to be something that people wanted more and more. I also found that there's a way of doing it that could be really helpful to people and be a good use of my skills and the skills of the people I can bring to work with me on this. And that, unfortunately, does not really include, for some people, unfortunately, doesn't include social media. It doesn't include their search engine results. It's what I'm looking at is not really about that. What I found after doing a bunch of research was that there were companies out there that will do this, that will help you find all of the people finder sites. So I'm talking about places like 411.com, Been Verified, the white pages, all those kinds of things, and will help you find your personal information where it pops up there and do the process of going through the opt-out mechanism that they have on their site to allow you to remove your personal information. Almost every single one of those sites has some sort of, sometimes arcane, unfortunately, and difficult to find process, but almost every one of them has it, and you can use that process to get yourself removed from those sites. But I found in my research that there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can go to one of these companies that advertises themselves as removing your information from all these sites, but they only cover a handful of them. Really, the top tier, like 411 and Been Verified, etc., up to maybe 20 or so. In fact, there are well over 100. And I really have to give credit here to the incredible research that was done in the last several years and up to the present by Michael Bazell and his crew over at Intel Techniques. They did some amazing research that kind of got me going on this, got me fired up about it. Because if you or your listeners your viewers haven't been to Intel Techniques, it's a super, super valuable resource with tools for investigating Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of social media, but then all kinds of other tools for investigating email addresses and so forth. So as part of that, they also provide a service where they remove people's personal information. They and the Hetherington group, Cynthia Hetherington, both were doing this, but sort of in a way that they don't advertise very widely. It's much more boutique operation for very select few clients. And I wanted to try to make that something that was more accessible. Now that said, I knew that this was a very large undertaking. Removing people from each and every one of those people finder sites and ensuring that removal every single month is a huge operation, and it's not for everybody. So that's what I realized, is that, that peace of mind that you can buy by getting yourself removed from those people finder sites, from those other companies that will do just a handful of the top ones and do it, a few times a year, that is awesome. Most people I know are going to be perfectly happy with that solution. TraceX, this company that we developed, is dedicated to a different clientele. It's dedicated to helping people who have much more at stake and who have much more exposure and need much, much more assurance that that exposure is limited as much as it possibly can be. Because really, in this field, you can't ever guarantee 100% anonymity. That's just not our thing, really. Unless you're gonna like spend, 50 grand and commit several, misdemeanors, possibly felonies, and totally erase yourself from all government and corporate databases. That's not something we're interested in helping people do. We're interested in helping people remove their personal information from places where average people with bad intentions, can go and try and exploit that information. So we're talking about names, addresses, social security number, names of relatives, assets, net worth, that kind of thing. So we're hoping to be able to provide that service in a much more comprehensive way to that slice of people who have that kind of exposure and frankly have those kinds of resources to be able to put that investment into it.
Sure. So specifically, what type of people you're referring to? Maybe you can give our viewers a sense of who that would be, and the types of people that they work with that would, see TraceX as a service that they can provide to their clients as additional, add-on.
Absolutely. Our clients are folks like medical professionals, folks who might have difficult patients or former patients that they don't want finding their information online. And that includes not just physicians, but psychiatrists, psychologists, all kinds of folks. People in the entertainment industry, top-tier athletes, or elite athletes, as many of them like to be referred to. In addition, law enforcement executives, justices and judges, people with a lot of exposure like that. High net worth individuals, people who may not be famous, but who have a lot of personal and family and business associations and assets that they want protected. So it's folks in those kinds of, our clients are not people like the super famous, the Obamas or Brad Pitt or somebody. Those folks maybe could be our clients, but folks at that level generally tend to put their resources into much greater security at their homes and businesses, and that makes total sense for that kind of a person.
Sure. So in terms of you mentioned how some services just do the top 10 and there's no 100% accuracy, but give us a sense just generally like what makes TraceX a little bit different. You explained to me a little bit of details offline about how that works. It makes perfect sense to me, but give our viewers a sense of, this is not just a one and done type of procedure that you can just do one time and stop. Give me some basic insights into the practical aspects and why TraceX is so much more different than, other ones that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that makes TraceX different is that we provide initial research that gives our clients a real footprint of exactly where they're exposed on these people finder sites. And again, we're not dealing with court records that are online or social media. That kind of information is outside the scope of what we're dealing with. What we want to be able to help people do is first get a picture of where their personal information is showing up, and then go through a concerted, step-by-step process where we remove all that information from each and every one of those people finder sites that we can find their information on. And then the key here is that we then continue that process month to month to month, because our clients are people who have normal lives, right? The way these people finder sites work is they take advantage of any time that you conduct a transaction online or off that would then make that information public again. There's really no way, there's no practical way of stopping your information from getting to those, from getting to a place where it can be harvested by those people finder sites, right? So every time you get a new certification for your professional certification in your field, or every time you buy a home or get a auto loan or sign up for a new service, all kinds of day-to-day transactions that we might have end up re-exposing, initially exposing or re-exposing our personal details. And there's really no practical way, for most of us anyway, of stopping that from happening. There are folks who take their privacy much more seriously and will do everything in their lives in such a way that that information never gets out there. That's not our clients. Our clients have better things to do. They're serving their patients, they're taking care of their clients, they're running a business. And so that information is just going to get out there. And with these other services, what makes TraceX different is that with most of these other services, really all these other services, they will, generally speaking, remove that information at one time, or initially and then several months later or a year later. Well, in that intervening time, that personal information can pop back up for many different reasons at many different times on many different sites. And so it really is a game of whack-a-mole that unfortunately you really need a professional to help you win at.
Gotcha. So and I think that it's so important for people to understand the difference, and understanding the kind of the roadmap of where things are and how they're exposed is super important, so they understand how they are at risk, which is just kind of the first step. So Eli, before we let you go, when you're not investigating, on behalf of clients and attorneys and your clientele, and you're not running TraceX, where do you like to spend some of your personal time, and what do you like to do in your non-work hours?
Gosh. Okay, well, I love biking. I actually have done several fundraising rides up here in Oregon and Washington. So it's beautiful country up here. It's amazing. There's some amazing places to go for long rides. That's a passion of mine for sure.
Road biking or mountain biking?
Oh, road biking. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are very serious mountain bikers, and my knees and my back are not built for that. They may have been a long time ago, but I would say my answer to this question is very different now than it was 10 years ago, given that I've got these ankle biters here who are taking up a huge amount of my time and attention. These days I'm as likely to read some really interesting new novel or catch up on the latest open source intelligence techniques as I am to just sit down with my teenage son and veg out on Minecraft for a good long time.
Very good, very good. Well, Eli, thanks again for coming on the show and taking some time to share with us, your viewers. We'll definitely link up all of your information in the show notes below, provide some links to TraceX. And if anyone has any questions for myself or for Eli, leave them in the comments below. We'll make sure that one of us gets back to you. Thanks so much for tuning in. And again, Eli, thank you for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Tim, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thanks.